I love that you said the word courage because it really is a quote of taking the first step, even though you can't see the end of the staircase. And it really is courage of, I don't know what the next thing is, but I just know what's going on right now doesn't work for me. That information is enough for me to take the unknown step of doing something different.
Welcome to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. Hi, I'm Janine Wolf, and I'm your colleague down the hall. I have a passion for helping fellow therapists get the clinical and collegial support we all need to do this work. And wow, it just keeps getting harder every day. I'm the founder and facilitator of the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. I have been a social worker for almost 30 years, and I own a successful solo online private practice. More of us than ever are practicing in solo or online practices, and we all need colleagues to process cases with, commiserate with on those really hard days, and also to celebrate our successes with. In this podcast, I'll bring you insights about trends and changes in our field and sit down with amazing therapists who are doing amazing work. We'll discuss fictionalized cases, ways to practice sustainably, and of course, there will be plenty of laughing. I love laughing with friends. I'm so glad to have you as one of my colleagues down the hall. Hello, everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Janine Wolf, joined today by Charese Josie. We met at a recent conference here in Virginia Beach, and I was really captivated by her talk and the things that she shared about clinicians and the work that we do and the work that she's done. So today we're going to talk about empowering clinicians, strategies for personal and professional growth. So welcome, Charese. I was so happy to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It was nice meeting you at the conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the things that you talked about were from a leadership position, a lot of those. So some of that is from the experiences you've had through the course of your career as a clinician.
Correct, yes. It was from being a clinician, but largely most of it was about discovering myself. Mm-hmm. I think as clinicians, we are leaders, right? There's a hierarchy, whether we want to admit it or not, like we want to be at the same level of clients, but there's always this hierarchy that we have to be mindful of in the work with clients. But it also shows up in other areas of our life of realizing, who am I? What position am I playing? And what influence am I having on the people that I'm interacting with? Mm-hmm. And this is whether we're in a formal leadership, like, we have this director or supervisor title, or whether we are just influencing someone. Somebody somewhere is looking at us to do something, right? And so there was a point in my life where I realized that how I was influencing other people wasn't really what I was desiring. My desire and what they needed was not in alignment of the message I wanted to leave anyone that interacted with me. And there was a huge disconnect. And then eventually I realized I wasn't even getting what I wanted. Mm-hmm. I was hitting the milestones, right? I was hitting the educational milestones. I was hitting the career milestones, all those things. But then when people would tell me kind of what their experience was with me, it wasn't always positive, even though my intention was positive.
Right.
What they received was not. And I said, this isn't the message that I want to give. So I had to do a lot of self-reflection. One of a business coach I had would say, we have to slow down to speed up. Mm-hmm. I had to let go of some of those titles, let go of that job where it looked good that I was a supervisor in the corner office. At some point, I had to not care anymore because I'm like, that didn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I'm sure that was hard, though.
It was challenging, some pay cuts in there. I mean, my resume pay was up and down, up and down, up and down for a period of time. Like, I'm trying to find myself, I'm trying to figure out where is it that land. So I had to take some steps back just to reevaluate and try a lot of new things. So how I got into leadership is because we all lead, officially, unofficially. And if we have children, your children are counting on you. They're looking at you, family members. And so I really want to, as I did that work with myself, and it's ongoing, it doesn't end, but as I did that pivotal role at one point, I realized that people always have that moment where, wait a minute, I've done so well, I got this position, but I'm miserable, people don't like me, what's going on? And so that's where I'm landing at in terms of my work now in the clinical field. in leadership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you bring up some really great points because, well, first of all, as clinicians, for all the ways that this work is so hard on us and challenging on us, I think it's really hard to do this work and not grow as a person. Absolutely. As we see clients growing and challenging them and gaining insight, and you get those little snippets in a session where you think, oh wow, I need to think about that for myself, or oh yeah, maybe I do that too, and I want to take a look at that. So I think that is a gift of our work that we sometimes forget about. Mm-hmm. And also the leadership piece, because there is that power differential in therapy work, whether or not we all consciously think of it all of the time. Actually, hopefully we do, because that's an important part of our work. Right. But that is, so you are sort of a natural leader when you're in the room. And I think that's what leads so many clinicians to want to start other businesses and to become entrepreneurs. You see so many people going out on their own these days, because I think it really sparks that interest in us that, yeah, I'm good at this. And I have some skills that I didn't really recognize that I had.
Right. I think, I agree that people want to venture off in entrepreneurship. I think since COVID, I think we've all learned that there's more to life.
Yes, absolutely. COVID gets a big credit for that.
Yes. I think we've learned maybe life can look and feel different than what I expected it to be. But I also think in that world, and COVID probably has a lot to do with this as well, is that I think we've learned a lot about ourselves emotionally. Mm-hmm. Maybe I do need to be around people more than I thought. Maybe I like my solitude a little bit. Maybe I need more of a balance. Whatever that is, we've learned something about ourselves that we need to pivot. But then as we're pivoting, this is where our mindset comes in. What really is good for me? Maybe it's not that I thought was the best. I was fighting for something that really wasn't in my best interest. That then goes back into my relationships and how I'm serving and how I'm influencing and how I'm impacting people. And so we're all making that shift, I think. And I think it's slow. And, I love your podcast, right? It's I'm going to private practice. I remember when I first got into the whole private practice world outside of, applying for jobs. I'm like, no, I want to start my own. And everyone's like, yes, I quit my job. I'm starting private practice. And everyone's celebrating. It's 600 likes, and all these comments.
Yeah.
All these things. But then when you really get into it, it's well, who do you go to for consultation? Mm-hmm. Because before you can just go to your colleague across the hall and just kind of go through, but it's wait a minute, you're by yourself. And then learning. I guess we got the CEUs, but do we always want to pay $200 for a day just to get some feedback for a client? Not really, right? Mm-hmm. So that ease is gone. That collaboration is gone. Now we kind of fell into that loneliness. Is this what I really want? Now we're looking at the money, the insurance, all these factors.
Right.
Let me read this out again, because first all those celebratory high fives are gone, and now we're left just with us. We're back.
Yeah, and that's such an important part of my consultation groups. Obviously, the primary reason people join is because they want case consultation, but they develop community. They get to know each other. They can be vulnerable. They can talk about, I had a client today that I'm just I just don't enjoy working with them at all. The work is good. It's effective, but I just don't like them, and it's that's not a popular thing to say out loud, but it is something that happens, and we can talk through that. Or your work is impacting your personal life or vice versa. One session recently, they're like, can we just have a rant session? I was like, you can do this whatever you want with this time. And so they all just talked about all the things that were frustrating in their work. And I was like, this is great. We can make this whatever you want, but to have that space that they know twice a month, they can show up and they can have that. So yes, that community is so important.
Yes. I think too, and the way that one thing I encourage my clients to do, if it's appropriate, depending on the client and whether I'm working with leadership, is something from a Netflix show. I think it's Rich Life, I think is what it's called. Mm-hmm. But it's what do you want your rich life to look like? And it's a show about finances. I hate the title because I don't think the title does the show any justice of the value that it brings. But it talks about not just what you want your financial life to look like. What do you want your life to feel like? What do you really want to do in your life? And I like the show it's just with ordinary, regular people, just people next door. And one guy was saying, I just want to go back to skateboarding again. He said, with my small kids and my busy life, he's like, I don't have time to skateboard. It's okay, so if we can construct your life just enough so you can skateboard, would you be happy? He said, yes. So it wasn't about being a millionaire and being out of debt.
Right.
I just want to skateboard. And so sometimes when I set myself, I'm working on setting my life up, which I've made large achievements of. I don't want to work with people that I can't serve.
Right.
If I feel I I get anxious when I see you on my calendar, or like I'm looking at the time like, come on, then I need to have a conversation with the client because I know that I'm not doing them any justice. And whatever the reason is, I don't have to know the answer, but this just is not a great fit. But I will help you put in a position of someone that will fit better. I don't want to waste my time. I definitely don't want to waste their time. I understand clients might feel, abandoned or something like that. But I try to use it in more in a motivational supporting type of thing. But my whole focus of how I want my life to look like and how I want my life to feel is that I am influencing and impactful intentionally with whomever I'm with. Because if I don't, I no longer have emotional energy for myself, for my kids, for my family, for my goals, for all these things. I don't want to go on vacation burnt out.
Right.
I want to go on vacation feeling good. Like I don't want to go because I'm just depleted. And so as much as I can set my life up like that, I will. We can't fight life. Life is going to happen to all of us, despite the best that we do. But I just want to be a service in that way for myself and for people that I work with. That's just kind of how one of my mantras, one of my values that I like to
Right.
do.
Yeah. I agree with all that. I do think it's important to have that colleague down the hall because in the scenario that I was talking about with someone who doesn't like their client, one of the things we'll talk about is, do you feel like the client is benefiting? And a lot of times they're like, yes. And I'm like, but just like you said, like I see their name on the calendar and I'm like, so then we process the work and can they do something different? But it also becomes mindset work. Okay, what kind of mindset can you try to get into before that session? Because your expectation of what this client work is going to be is not in alignment. And then what do you need to do for yourself afterwards? But sometimes the answer is, you need to refer that person out. Yeah, that's too much stress on you. Like if it is causing that much anguish to you every single week, you don't feel like they're getting as much out of it as you think they could, then absolutely we need to refer that person out. So that being in alignment with yourself, looking at the needs of those you're serving is really important. But I also like to do that with the eye of community, which is another thing that you support as well.
Right. Yes. Community is important and challenging sometimes. I think clinicians in the clinical world, I think we kind of have a shared experience of working with clients, our education and background, generally speaking. And then sometimes that's something I think about like on the business side of right? It's the community of where I feel safe. It communicates to me in a way that I can hear you, that it's supportive, not you're doing this wrong. Why are you doing it this way? Why are you, it's help me work through these things in a supportive way type of community. That kind of goes back to that. But it really sounds like I was looking at some of your stuff and I'm like, oh, she sounds really supportive and helpful. Like this is a nurturing, let's support, but move forward and be an intentional type of group. So
yeah, and that's so important. And when I was onboarding my first groups, and this all came out of me going into solo practice and not being prepared for how lonely I was going to be.
Right.
And so I created this, and I was onboarding my first members in June of 2020, and that's when George Floyd was murdered. There was so much going on in our country. There was divisiveness, and that was reflected in the therapist spaces that I was a part of. And it became really clear to me that safety and trust and benevolence was so important, and that's the culture of my whole program. And I onboard every member and we talk about what that means and what that looks like and what it sounds like when you're talking to people. It was disappointing to me anyway to be in these therapist spaces. I'm like, these are therapists. Come on, guys, we can be supportive. Right. Like, can we say something nice first and then offer a suggestion instead of tearing each other down, right? That doesn't serve any of us.
Right. I think the same way in leadership. I think my first supervisor job, I was a horrible supervisor, just terrible. I was like 15 or so years ago. I didn't think it at the time, but in hindsight, I'm like, ooh, that was painful for everyone, including me. But learned a lot since then. But just even being in meetings and learning and studying more about leadership, it's the loudest person or the person who's so passionate getting more, they call it airtime, right? Getting more space, right? And it's like, wait a minute, right? Being able to stop and be like, wait a minute, let's adjust the energy in here. Let's adjust the tone so that everyone can share and then offer something positive. And then what's the constructive feedback, right? And so, yeah, that's great. That's something we need to do.
Yeah, and it's hard when you have somebody who is more extroverted and they're passionate and they just want to share everything they know and they have that excitement. But then you look at the people who are more introverted and, in a group space, they don't have a chance of participating, right? They're just not going to do that. We have to remember that those people are out there and that they have a lot of really great stuff to give, because typically there's a ton of extroverts backing up that introvert that's up there, preaching and speaking and training and all that kind of stuff. But it's really hard to look at that sometimes. But I do think that's an important aspect of leadership and, working as a team and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So you do some work. So you work with therapists who are having challenges with their personal and professional growth. And that's sort of the direction you're going with this work that you're doing now. Because are you doing any clinical work at all at this point?
Yeah, I do clinical work. Most of it's not geared strictly toward therapists. It's more so for early to mid-level career supervising. People who are like first-time supervisors. But I'm leadership training and development is more from a therapy lens, where I'm going to come and help you understand you to be a better leader. Not necessarily, well, this is what you say to the employee, this is what you say to those things. Those things are beneficial and I'll add those. But largely when I work with leaders, I want them to understand why you do what you do, why you think what you do, and then what made you do some of the things, and try to be a little bit more introspective. I think a lot of times, whether in leadership or on the outside, sometimes we allow external to drive what we want to do, right? Who we are, what our emotions. Okay, I'm coming here, great, but this energy or this person or this situation or something someone said now has shifted my entire energy. But now we're giving a lot of people and a lot of things external power. It's like, well, what is it that you want? What is your intention? A lot of times when I work with people and they're like, I don't know this and I don't know this and a lot of I don't knows. And I'm like, well, what did you want the day to look like? What did you want the moment to look like? And they're like, I don't know. Well, let's talk about it. Let's go in with some intention about how you want your day to feel. We can't always control our schedule, although we'd want to. I do. I would love to. I do most of the time, but sometimes things come up that's unexpected. But then I still need to think about how I want my day to feel. And what I mean by that, if I'm like, some days I know I'm going to go, it's going to be a busy day. It's going to be probably a lot of giving and a lot of emotional energy putting out. And there's other days where I'm like, this is a calm day, but here's something unexpected happens, right? Client crisis, client call, those types of things. But if I still want to stick to this is how I need a calm day, my goal with that client crisis is going to be, how do I give you the most in the least amount of time possible? So ask, what is it that you want? What do you need? What's a win for you? I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to try to problem solve, because if they don't know what they want, I could be on the phone for a long period of time.
Yes. Right.
I don't want to. That's not how that is on my day, right? So yeah, kind of focusing on what is it that I want my day to look like, what I want my life to look like, what I want this moment to look like.
Yeah. And when you are, so beginning, mid-level people that are in business, leadership, you so often focus on the big picture. Like, what am I trying to achieve? And to have someone to say, let's slow down and maybe spend some time in the morning setting your intention for the day, or developing some habits to slow yourself down. And because it's like you said, it's so easy to get caught up in everything going on. I have 3 kids who are now adults, but I remember those days, and I would say my time is not my own, because I got the best laid plans and someone's sick or something happens, and that's true with our work too. We don't know when we're going to have someone in crisis, but being able to have something to remind you, okay, let me slow this down and think about how I want to handle this, instead of jumping in and getting caught up in the hustle and bustle of, I got to take care of this. So that would be quite a gift for somebody to have that sort of coaching, that sort of process in place.
Yeah, and that's what I work with them on, because it's so hard. It's so easy to get caught up, especially when we want to do a good job. And as you know, anytime you're leading or you have clients, business, you have the administrative, you have the people, and you have the systems thing. And I always encourage people to think about, well, is it a systems problem, a management problem, or a people problem? And we confuse the two sometimes, or sometimes we want people to solve a systems problem. Well, a system can solve a system problem, not the people, right? A direct supervisor is caught up in the system like you are. They're not going to be able to change the system. And so I tell people, hey, if you want to fight the system, though, there's a lot of advocates all the time. People advocate all the time. There's demonstrations, there's marches, but you have to be committed. If you're going against the system, you're going to need a team, but just know that's what you're doing. But sometimes we don't realize that we're doing. We don't like the way the system works. And so we can't put a finger on that person with the system. So then it becomes a people problem. But now we're frustrated because the person is not doing anything for them to do. And so that's why I like to teach that for people to understand what problem are we actually solving? What are we focusing on?
Yeah. So do you suggest specific tools, or is that sort of an individual type thing that you work on with people? Is there something that can translate to my audience that is like, I really love what you're talking about. How do I implement that?
So I work from a framework with emotional intelligence. I don't always say that because people are like, what is emotional intelligence? But it's about self-awareness and understanding relationships and your things. And so a lot of it's first starting with mindset, people understanding their mindset, then understanding their relationships. And then there's, from a therapy lens, right? There's triggers. They're like, man, I don't like this person. But sometimes it's good to know why. If it's a pattern where we're not putting it on the person necessarily, it's not like, oh, I don't like Sarah. What is it that Sarah's triggering in you? That's going to open up a whole more information. So I understand, there's their mindset, their relationships. And so I work through this framework with them in 6 parts. So I work through this 6-part framework. But it's all under the umbrella of emotional intelligence, of them understanding their own self-awareness, social awareness, relationships.
So when someone's working with you, how long does it take typically to go through that 6-step framework, or does it really just vary for the person?
Yeah, what I'm going to come up with now, I had a 6-month program, but I think I'm going to do an ongoing membership. Because in leadership, things change, people change, employees change.
Right.
We learn, we develop those types of things. So keeping the same framework of understanding themselves, but giving them some practical tools. So each membership month has a module that we'll focus on, but then there's other Q&A sessions that we'll have of, hey, Charese, so this came up this week though. How do I handle this? So we'll go through some of those practical tips.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And I think for people who are sort of in beginning stages, they don't recognize the importance of that. They're so focused on all the logistics of everything they need to do and writing copy and making connections and developing products and all those types of things. Right. But that's really important work that you can do early on to make sure you're on a good path, a solid path to grow on, creating that foundation to grow on.
Yeah. Playing the long game, right? Because sometimes it's a question of, well, how do I handle this? Or, I'm new to supervising, but I'm supervising someone who's been in the job for 15 years. How do I navigate that? All valid questions, but it's still going to be about your own confidence, your own self-awareness, and your own voice in that space. Because there's going to be a little bit of adjustment, but overall, you have to be consistent in how you're handling all employees. Your voice might be different, your tone might be different, some of the words, but the character of who you are and how you handle that environment needs to remain consistent to build that confidence. And so that's what I kind of work with within the framework.
Yeah. And so along those lines, I'm thinking of, I've heard so many, and the stories I'm familiar with are therapists who've hired VAs and the growing pains of not really understanding how to onboard that person and get systems in place and all of that. And just sort of thinking like, yay, I'm going to have help. And I have all these expectations that I've not communicated to this person. And now they're frustrated and I'm frustrated, Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny. I'm in that process now of hiring a VA, and, I've seen a lot of comments of the VA is not doing what I want them to do. And then someone says, what do you want them to do? And the tasks are 3 different skill sets that they want them to do. But, I think we all learn, but it's that push of, I just need help. I need someone to just take all this stuff off my plate. But it's like, let's be more specific, right? And learn. But that's funny you said that. I'm actually a VA was like, hey, Charese, what about proposal? Have you looked at? And I'm like, yeah, just all over the place a little bit. So let's scale it down. But we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. And this was with some business coaching I was doing, but someone was hiring a VA and they said, give them a task, give them a project, say, hey, I want you to do this, not something that's going to take months and months, but, something that's going to challenge the skill set that you're looking for and see how they produce that. And I was like, that's such a simple but brilliant suggestion all at the same time, right?
Right. But, that's so funny is why the collaboration is needed. right? I was, no, it was my second time supervising. This is when I vowed to never supervise again, but what do I know about life, right? So I'm supervising again, and it was the same scenario. It was an employee that's been there a lot of years before me. She applied for the position a lot of times, never got it. So I knew she was challenging me. I knew her questions were not genuine questions. And so I always felt this pressure of, what do I do? I don't want to seem combative, and I don't want to, but I don't want to respond to every last question. And so the job paid for me to go to this $200 training for a day that I wanted to go to about how to supervise. And so I shared that scenario with the instructor, and I said, how do I handle it? And he said, well, what do you say? And I was like, nothing. And he said, well, you haven't addressed it. That's probably why you're frustrated. I said, makes sense. Okay. He said, why don't you tell her, why don't you give me a minute? I was like, man, I paid $200 for 8 hours of here. Why don't you give me a minute? And I tried it and it worked. And I was like,
yes, that
probably could have been a text message, but that was valuable information.
Yeah.
Helpful, right? Just something so simple, but can you give me a minute? And it worked.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that just kind of speaks to the complexity of the way we look at problems at times. Instead of, can I narrow this down to this one little problem that I can address, to, oh my gosh, it's this whole big thing. She's been here for years. She's been passed over all these times, and it feels like this huge thing. But the person had to say, in the context of you asking the question, just the right thing, and it changed everything for you.
Right. Right. And had to look within myself because I was so focusing on her and the external versus what did I need? I needed a minute. I couldn't take all the barging in. So I have to frame that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you offer one-on-one coaching, but you're thinking of doing that in the form of a membership. And so are there other ways people can work with you?
Yeah. So I have my private practice. So I work with women leaders, one-on-one, and adult individual in the private practice. I have a Facebook community, the Influential Leader Network. There we have monthly free trainings and that. And then the membership program for people who have been supervising new to leadership within 3 months up to 3 years for the membership program.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds really wonderful. Since COVID, I feel like we're in such an uncertain time right now with these types of businesses because people were desperate to connect. Online was the only way to do that. So they wanted courses and memberships and all of that. And then they realize, no, I want to see people in real life. And it's just really hard to know. But the things that you're offering, really, even if you're a solo private practice owner, you could benefit from the things that you're talking about. Even if you're not supervising a team, you are running a business and you do interact with other clinicians and referral sources and all that type of stuff. And those are skills I think we undervalue ourselves as therapists, that we have so many skills that we just don't recognize. And working with someone like you that can help us say, like, okay, I do have this skill set. How can I maximize that in what I'm doing? Or how can I take a step back because I'm trying to move forward too quickly and I need to do some more foundational work and that type of a thing.
That's what I like, the collaboration that you have, right? Of when you get into different communities and you start having dialogue, and even dialogue to get outside of our immediate thing that we think is so important. It's like, well, what is my long-term goal? And the reason I got into this field is because I was feeling overwhelmed when I was supervising at a government agency. And so what you hear is no one leaves a government job. You don't do that, right?
Right.
But I'm like, but this is very challenging. I'm starting the new agency, me and my director. So we're hiring, we're creating systems. And I mean, imagine starting a government agency literally from scratch, So it was 3 years of a lot of stress. And then part of that, they sent all the supervisors to a 3-day training. It's called the Art of Clinical Supervision. And it was hosted by a therapist. We didn't know what we were getting. We were just thinking, oh, the government's sending us to another training. Here we go. I walked into the room and there was this really, really thick 3-ring binder on the table. We were all like, 3 days. And we barely opened that binder in those 3 days. By the end of the 3 days, I would say about 85% of us had tears. And so it was a training about us understanding ourselves as a leader and sharing our own stories of why we do the decisions that we do. And I'm sitting there watching her. I'm thinking, wow, she had taught me how to step outside of myself, of really feeling overwhelmed that there's another life out there. And I'm like, I can do this. I'm watching her. I'm like, I can do this. I understand what she's saying and I can do this. And she's still my mentor. That was like 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We still talk and communicate. I share my journey and doing what she showed me was possible, but being in community to show that there are other things to maximize our strength is really invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit on something that's very important to me that I try to bring into my trainings and the groups that I run, that we don't share our stories enough. And there's so many things that we weren't prepared for in graduate school that happen to us as therapists, experiences that we have. And because no one's talking about them, we feel shame. Being behind on progress notes happens to be the biggest one since the pandemic. Right. I know so many therapists struggling with that, and they're embarrassed and ashamed. And so to normalize that, to say, like, this happens. Or when I share my story about going into solo private practice, and I'd been in the field a long time and I was having imposter syndrome, and I was like, I know this is normal, but this is like on steroids right here, and just sharing those things that we happen and normalizing that. It's not something we do enough of in our field. And it's so powerful. It's so powerful for someone in a consultation group to say, I worked with a client that was like that. And let me tell you, that is such hard work. How are you doing? I remember how hard that was. I would go to home at night and cry. Are you doing okay? How can we support you? And that is so powerful.
Yeah. Because people want to know. People want to be asked, how are you doing? But I think they actually want to know that you care about the answer,
Absolutely.
And I think that's something, even me, being more intentional of making sure that if I'm asking someone how you're doing, that I'm actually in a space to receive the answer. So they're like, oh, I'm fine. I'm like, no, I was really asking how you're doing. And anytime that happens, they're like, oh, and then they'll share more, of how they're doing. But I think everyone wants to be seen and heard. We just need space to do so and space to ask.
Yeah. And that's, the thing that I talk about quite a bit, because I recognize it in myself, was focusing on ways to be sustainable in this work instead of jumping in and doing all the things. Like, you had to make a difficult decision to leave certain jobs and take a pay decrease, but you were doing it for reasons that were, I'm sure, personal and professional. And looking at the work that we're doing and the populations we're serving, how we're doing that, how are we structuring our day and our week? How are we making sure that we have time for our own needs? And I got severely burnt out with the first group practice that I worked at, because I would see 38 clients a week for 45-minute sessions, and I only had a break if someone canceled. That was such a bad idea. I would go home with nothing left at all. Nothing. I just wanted to go home and crawl into my dark closet with the door shut and pull a blanket over my head and tell my family to take care of yourselves, But what is the point of that? You have a family that you love and you want to enjoy. And so really looking at the sustainability of our work, and if what we're doing, if it's serving us now, that's great. But at some point in the future, if it's no longer serving us, having the courage to say, I need to make a change and I can't make a change. And I see a lot of therapists, and I remember this myself, they're like, but I have clients during that day. I can't possibly change my schedule. Well, yeah, you can. You really can. I've done it enough times now that the clients will either happily take a referral to someone else, or they'll say, I'm going to make it work because I love working with you. But having the courage to say, I can prioritize myself and my needs in the way that I'm serving others.
I love that you said the word courage, because it really is a quote of taking the first step, even though you can't see the end of the staircase. And it really is courage of, I don't know what the next thing is, but I just know what's going on right now doesn't work for me. That information is enough for me to take the unknown step of doing something different. I already know it's behind door number 1 and I don't like it. I'm going to go to door number 2. It was there. And I think that's how my life was full of curiosity. Groupon, I don't even know if we still, does people still use Groupon anymore? I don't know, but Groupon,
I had to take it off my phone. I was spending too much money.
I'm like, I don't know. Groupon was my friend. I'm like, I need to try so many things outside of my comfort zone, because I had to prove to myself that I don't have to live a cookie cutter, box cutter life. And I needed to do things by myself, not always with the crutch of a friend with me. I was like, I just want to go by myself. If I meet people, fine. If I don't, fine. I just had to hear my own voice and feel my own feelings, and then trust that I can work through whatever comes from that. And so, yeah, courage is a huge, huge factor in doing anything.
Yeah. And we encourage that in our clients.
Right.
But sometimes we're like, oh, I tell clients to do that all the time, but now someone's telling me to do it, and I don't like that at all. I don't want to do that. Right? One of my favorite tools with clients that I found years and years and years ago is meetup.com. I had these clients that were lonely and isolated and introverted. And I was like, there's a whole website. You just have to find a group of people that enjoy something that you enjoy. And they've listed it as a group. So they're not going to be like cliquish and unaccepting. They're basically saying, please come join us. Go and try something. If it's something you want to learn about or something you want to learn more about, or there's groups for people who are language learners, so many things. Yeah. And so it's like step outside of that comfort zone every now and then.
Right. Yeah, it's really rewarding. I mean, there's just to know another side of life. You can stay there if you want to, or you can do whatever, you were doing, but just know that I have choices and I have options. And so I'm not stuck in whatever is not making me feel at my best or be who I want to be. Just know that there's something different.
Yeah. And recognizing that sometimes you're going to take that step and it's not the right one. But that doesn't mean where you were was the right thing either. It just means now you have to look for your next up. There was a book years ago, leadership book called Failing Forward. And I just love that title. Like, even if you fail, you've got forward movement. You are still moving forward. You're ruling out the things that don't work or no longer work or weren't the right fit. And that just gives you more data. Okay, these are the things I know aren't going to work now. So what are the things that are left?
That's very true. When I was going through that phase, I went to a boot camp class at Mount Trashmore. And anyone know that's a park, a lot of hills and things. And it was a boot camp. I barely lasted the first session. I almost quit the first session, but it was a long walk to the car from where we were exercising. But as I'm doing all these exercises, I said, yeah, I won't use the rest of this Groupon because this is a lot. But I tried another one that was at the ocean front. It was to watch the sun come up. It's like yoga, exercise on the beach. I wasn't a fan of working out in the sand. That's a lot of work. But I did learn I love the mornings. I said the mornings make me feel calmer, and it was a good start to my day. So while I don't necessarily want to work out on the stand at 5 a.m., I do learn that I don't mind doing other forms of exercise or getting up in the morning while it's calm and peaceful. So that was something that I learned about myself just by trying something new.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have the same boot camp story. We weren't at Mount Trashmore, which, by the way, Mount Trashmore in Virginia Beach is a park that has they call it a mountain. It's really like a big hill that was created based on trash. They made a giant pile of trash and turned it into this beautiful park. It's pretty amazing. But yes, I went to one and it was hardcore. And I said, look, I'm not in good shape. My goal is to, and he pushed us so hard. And I was like, he does not know his client here, because I never went back. I was like, I got to ease into this. If I do this whole thing and you push me and I'm so sore, then I'm never going to do anything else. Right. So know your clients, right? That's another lesson here.
Right.
That's funny. So Charese and I are both in Virginia. We're in two different cities, not too far away, but it's always nice to talk to clinicians in this area. It's kind of a unique area. We have tourism, we have the military, we have rural areas, farmers, and all that type of stuff. So it's a really kind of cool mix of the Hampton Roads area here.
And this time of year is very nice, I think, because a lot of stuff to do outside.
Absolutely.
Free or low cost. So I like spring, summertime here. Yeah.
Yes, me too. Yeah. Let me ask my favorite question. Do you have a favorite catchphrase or analogy that you like to use when you're working with clients?
Yeah, something that I adopted. I really don't know how long. I don't know if it was this year or last year, but is we don't waste time over here. And it's something that I keep in mind for myself, and I've been saying it and people have been saying it back to me. And it's kind of funny because I'm like, oh, I kind of remind myself of that. But when people say it back to me, it's like, that's right, because we don't waste time over here. We don't waste time. And I think I don't know where it came from. It's just something that I'm always mindful of my time. I think about what's my rich life look like. I want to be in charge of my time. I don't want my time to be dictated by other people of things that's not rewarding for me or other things. And so as I'm having conversations, as I'm working with people, as I'm enjoying things, this is a good use of my time. But yeah, that's the thing. That's over here.
I love that. And it's such a good question too. Is this a good use of my time? Because especially with people who are neurodivergent, we're just like responding. And we're reacting instead of responding. So we're just jumping in there and doing things instead of pausing for that second and saying, is this a good use of my time? We don't waste time over here. Is this a good use of my time? So I love that. I hope that gets stuck in a couple people's brains that are listening, because I think that's an important message. Well, will you tell us where people can find out how they can work with you or more about your offerings?
Sure. I'm at Charese Josie on all social media platforms, CHARESE, and Josie like Josie and the Pussycats, JOSIE. And so I would love y'all join my Facebook group, the Influential Leader Network. We have monthly trainings. Those are free. My website is charesejosie.com. Pretty easy to find on there. And if you want to work with me one-on-one for counseling, I work with women leaders for counseling telehealth sessions. So you can find that on my website as well.
Okay. And for people who may be looking for a therapist, telehealth means that she can see you in the entire state of Virginia. So you don't have to live in Suffolk to work with Charese as a therapist. And I imagine with the coaching, you can really be anywhere in the world if they want to work with you. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I will have all the information you shared about your links and everything in the show notes so people can find you there. I appreciate having you on the Colleague Down the Hall podcast today. So everyone who's listening, please remember, our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Thank you so much for listening to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to colleaguedownthehall.com, where you'll be able to learn more about getting the clinical support you need and resources to help you work in a supported, sustainable way. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your therapy friends and colleagues. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you loved this episode, please leave a review.